The attics of old family homes are often like museums of forgotten memories. They are quiet, dusty archives of a life lived, filled with old furniture, holiday decorations, and boxes of things that were too precious to throw away, but not important enough for daily life. Most of the time, what they hold are just personal trinkets. But in 2021, a young woman clearing out her grandfather's attic found something else entirely. Tucked away in a corner was a forgotten suitcase from another era. When she blew off the dust and pried open the old latches, she was met with a sight that stopped her in her tracks. It wasn't filled with clothes or old records. It was filled to the brim with over 100 handwritten letters tied in neat bundles. As she began to read, she realized she had stumbled upon a complete, epic, and deeply personal love story between a soldier and his wife during the darkest days of World War II. It was a discovery that would launch her on a heartfelt mission to solve an 80-year-old mystery and reunite a family with its own lost history. But before we start our story, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any of our new, incredible stories. To truly understand the power of this discovery, we must first transport ourselves back to the world in which these letters were written. The early 1940s during the Second World War. For the United States, the war was a period of immense sacrifice, national unity, and profound anxiety. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, over 16 million Americans, mostly young men, would serve in the armed forces. They were sent thousands of miles from home to the battlefields of Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. In an age long before the internet, email, or even affordable long-distance phone calls, the primary, and often only, link between a soldier on the front lines and his family back home was the mail. Letters were everything. They were a lifeline, a tangible piece of home that could be held, read and reread in a quiet moment in a barracks or a muddy foxhole. For the families waiting at home, the mothers, fathers, and especially the young wives, the arrival of the mailman was the most important and most nerve-wracking moment of the day. A letter from their loved one brought immense joy and relief, a sign that he was still alive, still safe. But a long silence could bring crippling anxiety, and an official telegram from the War Department could bring devastating news that would shatter their world forever. The entire nation was mobilized for the war effort. On the home front, life was dominated by rationing of goods like gasoline, sugar, and meat. People grew victory gardens to supplement their food supply. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking jobs in factories to build the planes, ships, and tanks needed for the war, becoming symbolized by the iconic Rosie the Riveter. And everywhere, there was a sense of shared purpose and patriotism, with drives to sell war bonds and a constant stream of news from the front lines delivered through newspapers and radio broadcasts. It was a world of deep emotional contrasts, pride and fear, hope and loss, the monotony of waiting, and the terror of the unknown. And it was through this landscape that millions of letters crisscrossed the globe, carrying the intimate stories, declarations of love, and everyday details of a generation at war. Each letter was a small, precious artifact of a person's life, a record of their innermost thoughts during one of history's most tumultuous periods. It is this world that our story's protagonist, Chelsea Brown, has a unique passion for. Chelsea, a young woman from New Jersey, works as an interior decorator, but her true passion lies in history and genealogy. For years, she has made it her hobby to explore flea markets and thrift stores, not searching for antique furniture, but for lost personal histories. She seeks out old photo albums, forgotten diaries, and boxes of old letters, items that have been separated from their original owners. She then uses her genealogical research skills to act as a historical detective, piecing together the clues within these items to track down the living descendants of the people they belong to. She has, on her own time, successfully reunited dozens of families with these lost pieces of their heritage, driven by the belief that these stories deserve to be remembered and returned to the families they belong to. In 2021, she was helping her own family clean out the attic of her grandfather's home, a task familiar to many. And it was here that her hobby and her own family history were about to intersect in a way she never could have imagined. The attic was like many others, cluttered and dusty, filled with the accumulated possessions of a long life. As Chelsea and her family sorted through old items, she noticed an old, hard-shelled suitcase tucked away under the eaves, covered in a thick layer of dust. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Her family figured it was just full of old, musty clothes and were ready to discard it. But Chelsea's historical intuition kicked in. She felt a pull toward the forgotten object. She took it, wiped off the dust, and carefully worked the rusty old metal latches. They popped open with a stiff click. She lifted the lid, expecting the smell of mothballs and old fabric, but that is not what she saw. The suitcase was completely full, not with clothes, but with paper. It was a massive, immaculately preserved stack of over 100 handwritten letters, all neatly tied together with faded ribbons. They were all addressed between the same two people. The letters were from a young American soldier named Clement, who was stationed in the Pacific, and they were all addressed to his wife, Mary, back home. And there were letters from Mary back to him as well. It was a complete two-way correspondence, a conversation frozen in time. Chelsea sat down on the dusty attic floor, her heart pounding. She knew, even before she read a single word, that she was holding something incredibly special. She carefully untied the ribbon from the first bundle of letters and unfolded a page. The elegant, cursive handwriting immediately transported her back to the 1940s. She began to read. The letters were filled with the powerful, universal emotions of love and longing. Clement wrote to his dearest Mary about his daily life as a soldier, but mostly he wrote about how much he missed her, how he dreamed of returning home to her and starting their life together. Mary, in her letters, wrote about her life on the home front, about her work, her family, and her constant prayers for his safe return. It was an intimate, deeply personal, and complete love story, told in their own words, that unfolded against the epic backdrop of World War II. Chelsea realized she wasn't just holding old paper. She was holding a sacred piece of a family's history. These letters did not belong in a dusty, forgotten suitcase. They belonged with the family of Clement and Mary. At that moment, her weekend task of cleaning out the attic transformed into a personal mission. She knew she had to find out what happened to this wartime couple, and she had to find their family and give them back their story. Chelsea Brown's mission began right there on the dusty floor of her grandfather's attic. With the reverence of an archivist, she carefully organized the more than 100 letters. They were a complete chronological record of a relationship under the immense strain of a world at war. She knew the first step was to mine the letters for every possible clue. She spent the next several days meticulously reading each one, not just as a romantic story, but as a historical document. She transcribed key pieces of information: the full names of the couple, Clement and Mary, their last name, the addresses on the envelopes, the names of relatives they mentioned, and the military postmarks which detailed Clement's journey through the Pacific theater of the war. She was building a profile, a genealogical skeleton that she hoped would lead her to their living family. Armed with these details, Chelsea dove into the digital world of genealogical research. She used online databases like Ancestry.com and historical archives to start piecing together the puzzle. She found Clement's name in the 1940 census records, which confirmed his hometown. She found his military enlistment records, which detailed his service. Every new piece of information was a small victory, a faint echo from the past growing slightly louder. She managed to build a basic family tree, identifying Clement and Mary's parents and siblings. But this is where the trail grew cold. She was trying to trace the family forward through time to find their children or grandchildren, but she hit a wall. People move, names change, and records can be incomplete. After weeks of dedicated searching, she was no closer to finding a living descendant to give the letters to. Frustrated but not defeated, Chelsea decided to turn to a uniquely modern tool for solving historical mysteries: social media. She knew the story of the letters was powerful, and she believed that if she could share it with enough people, someone, somewhere, might recognize a name or a detail. She created a series of short videos on TikTok. In the first video, she simply showed the old suitcase and the massive stack of beautifully preserved letters, explaining what she had found. She then began to share small, anonymous excerpts from the letters, reading Clement's heartfelt declarations of love and Mary's anxious but hopeful replies. She was careful not to share any sensitive personal information, but she shared the raw emotion of their story. She ended her videos with a simple plea: "Help me find this family. These letters need to go home." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Her story went viral. The first video was viewed hundreds of thousands of times, and then millions. People from all over the world were captivated by the story of Clement and Mary. The comment section was flooded with messages of support, with thousands of amateur detectives offering to help with the search. Her story was a perfect storm for the internet: a real-life romance, a historical mystery, and a heartfelt quest. The viral exposure pushed the story beyond social media. News outlets picked it up, and Chelsea's quest was featured on local and national news programs. The story of the lost letters was now being shared with millions of people. And then the breakthrough came. A woman who had seen the story on a news segment recognized the names. She contacted Chelsea with the crucial piece of information she had been missing, a lead that connected her to a living relative of Clement and Mary. After a few more messages and a phone call to verify the connection, Chelsea found herself on a video call with a woman named Barbara, the daughter of Clement and Mary. Barbara was in her 70s and was stunned to hear the news. She knew her parents had written to each other constantly during the war, but she had never seen the letters. She believed they had been lost to time. The family was able to fill in the rest of the story. Clement had, in fact, survived the war. He returned home from the Pacific, and he and Mary were reunited. They lived a long and happy life together, raising a family. They were married for over 60 years. The family explained that the letters had likely ended up with one of Mary's relatives for safekeeping, and over the decades and through various family moves, had been forgotten, eventually ending up in the attic where Chelsea had found them. Now, thanks to Chelsea's determination, their story was no longer lost. The climax of the journey was the reunion not of the original couple, but of their memories with their family. Chelsea carefully packaged the precious letters and sent them to Barbara. A few days later, they had another video call as Barbara and her family opened the box. The reaction was profoundly emotional. For the first time, Barbara was able to read the intimate thoughts and declarations of love from her parents when they were just young people, caught in the great drama of history. She saw her father's handwriting. She read about his fears and his dreams of coming home. She saw her mother's strength and unwavering devotion. The letters were a window into the beginning of her own family's story, a story she had only ever known the later chapters of. There were tears, laughter, and an immense sense of gratitude. The letters had finally come home. Chelsea Brown's discovery in that dusty attic became more than just a viral story. It became a beautiful testament to the enduring power of love and the importance of preserving personal history. It was a perfect marriage of the old and the new, where 80-year-old handwritten letters were saved from being lost forever by the modern, global reach of social media. The story inspired thousands of people to look into their own attics, to ask their grandparents about their own stories, and to see the old boxes and forgotten albums in their homes, not as clutter, but as priceless family archives. For Chelsea, the mission was complete. She had taken a forgotten bundle of paper and turned it back into what it always was: a family's heart preserved in ink, a timeless story of love that had finally found its way home.